welcome to the Perspectives podcast created by the Gender Equality Research Institute. My name is Ana Pavlic, and today on this sunny spring afternoon at the Faculty of Social Sciences here in Ljubljana, I am joined by Lucijo Tacer Perlin, one of the youngest members of the Slovenian Parliament. Lucia was just recently elected to the National Assembly for a second time. Together we'll be talking about politics as a space that still remains challenging for many women to enter, navigate and reshape. Lucia, thank you for joining us.
Of course, thank you for inviting me.
So entering Parliament at a young age often challenges traditional hierarchies of experience and authority. Could you please describe a moment where your age, maybe even together with your gender, concretely shaped how your input was received, and of course, how did you respond, or how are you still responding to that if this is an ongoing process?
Yes, this is a great question, and I think it probably impacts everything I say, as a lot of our features that we can't change about ourselves do. But I think Parliament is special in this way, and it actually gives young politicians like a special argument because, okay, if you're a young minister, I think it's even maybe more challenging to be always convincing people that you are the right person for this job. But in Parliament, the reason for Parliament is to represent all voters, so all citizens. And voters are not only those who have 10 years of experience working, are not only those who are older than 50, but are actually from 18 onwards in Slovenia. And if we don't have young parliamentarians, actually, Parliament is not representative. So in this case, I think that is one of the most handy arguments that I have, you know. Still? Bringing it forward to people, you know. We have our citizens, our voters are of all different ages, and we must also take these experiences into account. And maybe you, because you're a different generation, cannot and maybe relate to what they're saying, but I came from this perspective. Many times this especially is evident on the topic of housing, because we have such different experiences. But yeah, when I was reading these questions for preparation, though, I thought of actually an experience I had in law school here in Slovenia, that I think I continually take this lesson also in politics. Whenever I have these responses from people where I see it's not about the content that I said, but it's because I said it and I'm a woman and I'm a young woman, and they're not taking it as seriously as if somebody of a different stature said it. And this was a professor of not my favorite course in law school, very hard course. And I did not agree with him on so many things. And it really frustrated me. I was like, I don't know if I should be posing questions in class, like trying a bit to, how to get your point across and also not let other people demean you, which sometimes was happening at our faculty from professors. And then I realized the only way I can effectively beat him, if I can say this, is if I get a 10 on the exam. He won't be able to say he's going to have to give me the good grade. And I did that. And I think most of the time that's the biggest agency that we have. And I try to focus on that. And I think a lot of times that's how you can get further, even dealing with people who have maybe prejudices about your personal characteristics.
Okay. Do you think that your age or your gender, which is the most...
It's hard to say.
The biggest obstacle?
I think this combination is
the hardest.
Is a winner, because I don't know if this is true for all EU countries. I don't have that much experience internationally. I had experiences in the US where I studied. And I must say that when I came back to Slovenia, I had quite a culture shock. Okay. Because in numbers of gender equality, we're doing great. We are better than the US in many aspects. But I think in the things that we tolerate being said to us and some cultural, soft, how would I say, relationship things that are still acceptable are decades behind. So I would say that I couldn't pick one. I think young women especially. Women in general are facing this. I see also my older colleagues who are great experts, but it helps to trivialize you more if you also don't have that many years of experience.
Great, let's stay with gender. As you know, gender research frequently highlights the double bind in leadership, where us women are expected to be assertive, but we also risk a backlash if we are perceived as too direct. How does this dynamic maybe influence your way of doing politics?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I have the right answer yet, but one of the strategies that I've tried to employ is to identify moments where you see that you can't be the one giving the message. Sadly, you're dealing with different people or the citizens where you have to communicate things, or negotiations that are behind closed doors, but you're dealing with different people who have certain power and they also have certain prejudices. And I found that maybe in some situations you can be the strongest if you know that with this particular individual, because they hold prejudices, it is smarter of you to, find an ally than maybe to go, I don't know what the expression in English is, but just, try to go forward yourself. And sadly, with the circumstances, a lot of times that doesn't reach a result.
We all know that legitimacy in politics is not only formal, it's especially really socially constructed. What in your experiences most strongly influences whether someone is perceived as credible? You mentioned this in your first answer, but to deepen.
Yeah, I think this is a really good point that I didn't understand much before entering formal politics. How little a function really gives you in terms of respect. It's not an equal thing. Just because you get a certain position, if people don't respect you, it really changes the amount of things that you're able to do. So there are definitely different things that influence it. I would say one that always comes to my mind, and I've heard studies confirm it, is if your voice is low and you're speaking slowly, and I never managed to do that. I'm learning to sometimes do it, but I see that those people that are communicating that way really are perceived differently. But then, of course, what one has accomplished in their life, and if they have certain pedigree, I think that still affects it a lot.
It was really interesting. You mentioned that policy frameworks on gender equality in Europe and especially in Slovenia are relatively well developed, but implementation often lags behind. Where do you see the most significant disconnect between policy intentions and maybe everyday political and social practice?
Well, we had a big, I think, disparity in terms of maternal, paternal leaves, which were available for a long time, but we knew in practice they were not being divided equally, which also had consequences on in the workplace, because somebody hiring a young woman was expecting her to take the whole time, not for the parents to divide it. Now we know that has changed. So it's a bit more equal, that also the parental leave, there's a 60 days, I think, that the father cannot transfer anymore. So slowly working towards that. But a gap in implementation, I mean, I think there are always gaps in implementation when the mindset is not there yet. right? I mean, we passed in the previous mandate, which I'm proud of, quotas in leadership of companies, although it only affected, I think, a bit more than 20 companies in Slovenia because of the size limits that were set, and also had many options if they are not able to fulfill the quotas, how the companies can explain it and it's still okay. I mean, these are all mechanisms that if the climate in society is not there yet to see a value in gender equality, it will definitely take longer when we have more or less rigid mechanisms. So I think almost with every measure, this discrepancy is there. But the biggest one and the hardest one, which I know you also put a lot of work into, are the stereotypes and just the mindset with which we are still raised with.
Yes. Yeah. We often talk about politics as an old man's club or a boys' club. How was your experience entering in this world?
My experience was not like that.
Okay.
Also because I entered parliament in one of record numbers of women's in parliament, I think. The most in Slovenia was the first year I entered parliament, and our parliamentary group was the only one where we actually had more women than men.
Yes, and also you actually were a part of a new
party. Yes,
party,
that was just developed before this election, so it was not a parliamentary party before. And I must say that with my close colleagues, I didn't feel that. But of course, in wider negotiations, this does play a role because networks from previous experiences that people have had that lead to politics
are still male-dominated.
Yes,
yeah?
yes, that were had before, and usually they continue on in parliament, and those are ones where I think somehow as women it's harder for us to get into it. The one that's the least discriminatory is the smoking club. So that's the one I've tried to join, not smoking, but I go there with coffee.
I'm a part of the smoking club. Yeah. They're really inclusive.
Yeah, that's one where I think people are, it's an informal network that is not very exclusionary. But a lot of other ways that parliamentarians are connecting is, I think, it's a bit harder for women.
But what's the biggest obstacle for a young female politician, to start?
To start?
Yeah. What do you think?
I think we face different obstacles. It wouldn't be just one for even younger female politicians, but I think female politicians earlier on face a certain moment where you are objectified. It's sooner than, or I don't even know if male politicians face it. Maybe, I hope not. But it happens very quickly. For me, it happened before I entered politics officially, and I will never forget. I was still trying to pick a party in Slovenia, and I did not want to join a party that was named after a person. That was a complete no to me. I was like, how am I going to become the president of the party of Alenka Bratušek? This is not democratic. So until I was searching around which parties that align generally with my ideals, where I could possibly find my place, and I went to different events. And at one of the events, I think that person was an MP at that time, he came to me and said, "Oh, wonderful, you're interested in our party? We always need models."
Oh.
Didn't even ask my name, nothing. And this was not that, I'm not that old, it didn't happen that long ago. And you don't forget that. That's, of course, you move on.
How did you respond? What did you say?
I mean, I didn't say anything. That was just like, it went on. I was a nobody, but those are moments that if you want or not, they stay with you, and they give you you need your community, your network that supports you to say, it's important that you do this. You need to continue. And this is a mild thing that happened to me. Sadly, I think that, even worse objectifications and harassment is faced elsewhere. And I can imagine that then if you don't have the adequate support, I'm very lucky that I have extremely supportive family and friends. But if you don't have that, I can imagine that at an earlier point you say, I don't know if this is worth it for my mental health, you know?
We all know that public trust in institutions is declining across many countries, also here in Slovenia, especially among younger generations. We were talking about this part of the population a lot when we were analyzing the election results here in Slovenia. From your perspective, what are the key drivers of this disengagement or mistrust?
I think democracy is the best form of government that we have an option to do. But it's also one that if we are not continuously working on it, it's easier to go into autocracy, I think, than keep democracy strong and keep people believing it, because it takes a lot of effort, a lot of work to understand what people want and how to reach it. A lot of times easy solutions are not as effective when you try to put them into practice. And I think this work is hard, and maybe we have been too lazy in the last decades on taking it for granted. Our predecessors fought for this. I was born into a democracy, and I grew up with this idea that I can always say what I think. If I think something must change, there are certain public mechanisms that I can do, even if I'm just a citizen, to get something to happen. But of course, if people see that those things are not functioning properly, that they cannot affect real change, they're starting to doubt. And the other thing that democracy doesn't have that autocracy does is that it's less effective, of course, because we must discuss everything. People don't agree.
It takes time.
You need time to reach a compromise, and maybe you will build the railroad slower, but at the long-term cost, you will have many more rights living around that railroad than you would if you were in an autocracy and somebody can one day just say, okay, well, I don't like what you have to say. Please, stay at home and do your job and don't raise your voice.
Are you optimistic about the future in regard to this question?
I have to be.
Okay.
We don't have a choice, I think, in this point. The social media makes it different on the ways that we will have to approach it, because the types of messaging that are more prone to get around go viral. Yeah. They're not as inclined to complex explanations. But at the same time, I think also we must be able to explain policies in an understandable way. And sometimes maybe in the past we have been too scholarly or too keeping our distance too much from the people. So I think that if we work on this communication in person and taking advantage of all the new media that we have, we can do it. We can improve our democracies.
Great. You mentioned quotas before. Many discussions nowadays really focus on increasing only the number of women in politics, but there may be tackling less the transformation of structures themselves. In your view, what would have the greatest impact? What change?
Quotas versus
the transforming of the structures, not just numbers.
I'm just not sure how we will transform the structures if we don't have women there to help with it, and if we don't have quotas. Currently, we don't have enough women in leading.
Quotas are just a start?
Of course.
Yeah?
I want to live eventually in a world where we don't have quotas. I agree with anyone making that argument. However, if my alternative is to wait 150 years for there to be a world, if the progress continues, let's say, without much backsliding, or have it in the next a couple decades with quotas, I think it's our duty in the historical context to make sure that this transition is faster, and then we can make better systems for our whole society.
Okay, and now let's go back to smoking. So, what would be your advice? Maybe
don't smoke, please.
Yeah, that was a
public
joke.
Healthcare.
Yeah, that was a joke. Your advice for young female politicians? Maybe they're sitting here today, listening to you.
Maybe two things. First one is a strong support network. You're gonna need it. Your family and your friends, whoever, from whichever pool you can draw, I think that's just a must. I can't imagine continuing forward without that, because there are times that are very hard, and when you're in politics, you must know before going into it that part of your job is that you are a public person and people will publicly express if they agree with you or not, and that's how it should be. But a lot of times, some of those things may not be easy to hear. So it's good to have a support system with whom you can, they're a little bit biased towards you, so you can talk to them and they give you a bit of support. And the second thing would be going hard on the content. Okay. Picking some areas where you can excel. This is for everyone, not just women, but I think those are effective ways to prove those who want to discredit you wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And now it's also time for your questions. So I would really like to invite the students maybe to ask something our guests.
I have some technical question. How does gender equality policy institution in Slovenia look like, and is that working properly by your opinion?
Well, as far as I'm informed, from our equality bureau, the ministry, we fell on the gender equality index last year.
Yeah.
So certain things are definitely not
something that's happening a few years
because
now.
Also for Slovenia.
Yeah.
But apparently also the formulation is becoming different how they calculate it. That's what I heard too. But I mean, gender equality policy is very wide, right? You're targeting it in different specters. I think one of the very important ones that we have is accessible childcare and paid maternity leave and parental leave. But Anna is more of an expert on this, so I'm sure she will add. And I think it is very effective, especially as we compare to other countries. However, that doesn't mean that there are areas that have to improve, especially, for example, in politics. We don't have systems in place like the European Parliament has just implemented. If MPs have kids, we have no systems. You just are not there. There are no mechanisms for that. But I think we started in a good place, and now we must foster, I think, also the understanding in the community that gender equality is something that is good for all of us, and we'll be able to make maybe even some things that we already have in paper work better in practice.
And maybe we have some to add something positive, because I'm a pessimist regarding this question, so maybe it's better that I don't say anything. We have some really nice stuff written in our constitution regarding gender equality. So please,
regarding abortion,
that's something
the
really
right to abortion
important.
Is,
we have it in our constitution.
Yes, 55th.
Yeah.
Article.
Yeah.
Can take a look.
Thank you. Yes, could you please pass the mic?
So I would like to ask specifically about the quotas, because if I understood it correctly, you mentioned that the real problem is that policy is farther forward than the actual thinking of the people, than the social norms. So I'm thinking whether if there is like such a hard policy measure such as quotas in management or whatever, does it not alienate the conservative part of the society? So is it not really causing the problem a little bit as well?
I would say one thing about the quotas in corporate governance is an EU measure. So it's an implementation of a directive on the EU level. But I think actually one of the reasons, and this is really from my not being an expert on this, so please Anna fill me in, but because we used to live in a socialist society, and this was part of the ideology that men and women should work, you know, something that was not obvious in the West. So on paper, we're like, oh, great, all women are working, they're fully involved in society. But the mentality was the same as in the place, for example, where women were at home, and maybe the mentality of people didn't change as much, but because of the socialist ideology, a lot of the markers about workplace participation, access to, you know, kindergartens that had to come with that, and maternity leave, on paper looks very good. But that was not a policy that was instituted because the people said we need to have equal opportunities for men and women, but maybe because it was in line with the ideology of all the workers participating. So I think that has to do, I was reading Slavenka Drakulic, and I think she also mentioned that aspect, and it really made a lot of sense to me, because my grandmothers were both working, but the ideas that I know also my grandparents had maybe are not the most progressive in terms of gender equality.
When our grandmothers started working, I think that the biggest problem that emerged was that their partners or their husbands didn't do their part of the deal regarding the domestic work, the care work, and now we are facing, you know, this generation of double-burdened women, I think. So that's also the problem. And maybe to add something to your question, the European Gender Equality Institute has this IG index, and they measure it every year, and Slovenia has the worst standing always on the knowledge part of this index, and this is actually proof or demonstration of the really strong stereotypes that still, you know, run in our society.
And to add a little on that, to me that was very interesting, coming from a liberal bubble in the US where I studied at college to here, is that this is now convenient for maybe those actors in society where they do not want necessarily further improvement on gender equality, because the statistics are a good excuse to not really pay much attention to it. Some of the ones where we are good.
Of course, and you cannot always manipulate with statistics. Next question, please. Yes?
Maybe another question. Well, how to ask that question? My first question is about the some consensus between the parties in parliament, and is that possible to left-right discussion regarding that issue? Is that effective? Is the right wing or are managed to the both sides are managed to talk to each other about that and to make some consensus? And also maybe that simple question, how to engage men, especially fathers, in this topic is interesting.
Very good question.
We have a club of female parliamentarians where it's meant to be above party lines so that all women join, and the idea is exactly that, to put forces together in those measures where we agree, to bring policy through as big consensus as possible. We actually implemented an action plan at the end of the last mandate, and one of the steps that was recommended was actually having a sympathizer MP section of our male colleagues who want to, who also are interested in the topic and want to support changes, to include them in those debates. But definitely we have disagreements on concrete measures very many times. Actually, in the previous mandate, we tried to pass change in the standing rules, which requires a large majority about exactly for this maternity leave, and we weren't able to find enough consensus. But there was work on it, and these things I think slowly will proceed. And how including men, I think we need to work on including them in all discussions, including us, talking about gender equality and the stereotypes that we all are facing. If we
it should be our common
are
goal.
living inside of them, I'm sure men have many of them as well. But I think maybe because of the stereotypes they're living with, sometimes it prohibits them as much to engaging in these conversations. So I agree that we must focus on this element.
Like this is treated as the more female topic, like
yeah, which is wrong.
Yes, could you pass?
Does anyone want to be a politician here, by the way?
Yeah,
Hands up, who wants to be a politician?
Great.
3, 4, 5, 6, okay. Better than usually, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the quotas, because you said earlier that you support them, right? Yes. Yeah. So I agree that we should strive for the fact that the members of the parliament in all countries are somewhat equal, around 50-50. But my problem with the quotas is that, in a sense, it can diminish the status of women in the parliament, because, as you probably know, there are a lot of older white guys that think, well, I shouldn't care what the young woman in the parliament has to say because she's a woman. And with the quotas, not only that will happen, but they might also think that, well, she shouldn't even be here because it's not fair, she shouldn't even get in. So how do you solve that? I agree that there should be around 50-50. I hope that it will happen, but how do we avoid that feeling of unfairness?
Well, we don't have a feeling of unfairness because the quotas are on the list. So our list for national parliament needs to have 35% women on the list. And that means people are still electing. They have a choice to circle someone. So I think, at least in Slovenia, this is, even though we also have many men who would be inclined to think like that, luckily I can report that, in my experience, nobody is thinking that the women in the parliament are there because of the quotas. More, they are there because the party put them in a certain district. That's
And
more
then
effective.
They can manipulate with that.
Yes, the parties can manipulate with that a lot more effectively. But yes, the 35% quota forces the party basically to go on their field and find at least 35% of each gender to have on their lists. But they can much more influence the result based on where this person is placed. So I think it is a rational fear, a question to pose. In our case, I don't think it's a problem. It would be different if certain amount of seats were reserved for women, which is what some parliaments do that. But the quotas that we're talking about, I think in the European context, if we're talking about politics, they are on the list. So then people still elect. But you need to give people at least 35, there's some local elections are 40 now, 40% of choice of different genders, so that they can pick. But yeah, in some parliaments, but I don't think this is in Europe, they have an exact number of seats that's changed. I think this milder one where you have the list quotas is more effective for democracy. Yeah.
Yes?
I was growing up in matriarchy, so for me this discussion is like not really understandable. And I like your idea of quotas being just a stage toward the next, maybe where humans are like equals. And my next question on you is, as a young lady going into politics, you entered a system which was already made like it is through decades of hard work of mostly men. So my question is, are you already thinking in your, I don't know, party or with other parliamentarians, how can we get more legitimacy of the population you are representing? So my question is this, because many times when we are discussing with colleagues and others, we don't feel always really represented with whichever, with whoever is in the parliament that our opinions heard. And we are now entering the phase where everybody is using digital devices like everywhere. So my question is, when is internet democracy coming? When are we gonna start including this so that you can get like every day or every week or whatever, direct legitimacy of the population, which is also helping you to get 50% of women legitimacy of I don't know what, but you can get direct legitimacy. You don't need to change and work on quotas, but you can maybe through that get the legitimacy of also females, that we can make this system better.
So you would like a system of direct democracy where we are voting every day on bills on our phone. Maybe that is the future. I will tell you from work in parliament, it is incredibly hard to read all the bills. If that's your full-time job, I can't imagine having a full-time job and being responsible to pass national legislation. It is quite a lot of work to read through all those materials and then decide which choice would be correct. So maybe for some more complicated laws, that could be very dangerous because people could be exploited, forced basically to make an easy decision on a thing that they don't have time. But I'm not discrediting it. But I think there is one more step, especially in Slovenia, in this process, and this is what I was working on the previous mandate, the whole mandate, so that people have a more direct effect on who represents them in parliament. Currently, we have a system where the parties have a very influential role on where they will place their candidates, on how likely they are to be in parliament. And you actually, as a voter, you're more or less casting your vote for the party. You cannot influence that much who the person will be. And so we had a consultative referendum, which is not binding, but more than 70% of people said that they would like to have a choice to circle the person's name. This is a proposal. I worked on 3 to 4 different proposals. However, it is very hard when you have people in parliament, sadly, still who would be harder for them to get in if they had to prove their name by themselves. Me being one of them, but I feel like I have a lot of skills and I can also find a job elsewhere. I don't need to cling to this seat no matter what. But definitely this was a reason that it hasn't been passed. So people still sadly do not have this chance to circle the person's name who will present them in parliament. And I think that would be an important step, so that you know, I circled this person's name, they came in the parliament, I know who they are, and I will expect now in the next 4 years to see them around sometime and, or let them know about certain things that I think should be changed. I think in regards to digital, we will hopefully have more direct democracy, especially we have this consultative referendum, which I mentioned, which costs a lot of money, 6 million each time to check non-bindingly what people think. Maybe that could be the first step to make that digital and make it non-binding, so that in case where it's a topic that, could easily be exploited, because that happens. Famous dictators have abused referendums to achieve unhonorable things. So we must be careful. Not all direct democracy is the right way for everything, but I think this is a good idea and good move forward. Maybe consultative referendums going in the digital space as a first step. Yeah.
If I might just reply shortly.
Yeah.
Switzerland has around 50 referendums per year,
yes,
because they feel that the opinion of their voters, constituents, is really important. So on every important question, they have to ask them. And you need to worry, I'm a programmer also, and this part of the question, how you could get through all these suggestions and ideas of the voters, is easy to circumvent with programming these days. And so that to you only those important questions or suggestions will come, which already have support maybe of the 10,000 others which click there, yes, support this one, let's go to the next stage.
Switzerland also accepted on the referendum a ban on minaret building, which in Slovenia is unconstitutional. So definitely direct democracy has a lot of merits, but I think we must be careful when implementing it.
But we should
minorities.
be positive in the opinions and of the constituents and voters. We should not discredit them.
Well, if we have a constitution, right, not on all matters the majority always wins, because certain minority rights cannot be protected in direct democracy. And I think if we believe in having constitutional democracies, which means we all have certain basic human rights, we will not, for example, put on referendum if people with blue eyes can enter the stores on Sundays, and then we will all be deciding on referendum. Or I tried to trivialize it, but certain minority groups in their rights should not be questions that a majority should ask on referendum. I understand the appeal, but certain undemocratic forces are very, very keen on using these instruments to go in a very wrong direction. So we must be alert.
Thank you. Yes?
Thank you.
Go ahead.
You mentioned some of the social and cultural stereotypes that kind of either push women out or prevent women from going as far as they can into politics, such stereotypes as that you mentioned before, like having a deeper voice, maybe even being taller, for instance, and such social constructions that identify power as something inherently masculine. What do you think the kind of genesis and origin of that is, and what do you think is the way that society can like really overcome this? Do you think it's based at all in biology? Do you think it's based culturally? I'm just curious.
I think it's based on what we're used to. And if we've been used for centuries of male leaders, and every now and then a certain female leader when there was a certain anomaly, it is natural that those are the characteristics that we associate with leadership. But hopefully, as those trends will change, also our expectations will.
I have a question. It's also related to equality, or let's say social justice. In recent years, there have been some deepening inequalities in Europe because of the energy crisis, inflation, even COVID. So, do you think that this also somehow undermines the legitimacy of democracy and institutions? And what do you think is the solution, or do you address it also in your work?
You're talking about like the fall in purchasing power, so on, due to inflation and the connection to democracy, or what do you mean?
Deepening inequalities. Let's say that, like in the peripheral regions, for example, the wages are lower.
Yeah. But do you think this is tied directly to democracy? It's probably also happening in autocratic countries?
Well, I think like the people usually in these regions, they are more, they tend more than to vote for populist parties, and I think it's kind of vicious circle. So what do you think about it, and what's the solution?
The solution is, I think, what we saw in Hungary, what we saw in New York before. The solution is not being elitist and going on the streets and talking to the people. Like you said, directly hearing their concerns and trying to explain to them that easy, fun solutions that may be offered on TikTok may not work. Explain to them what, in your opinion, will work. And I think with this direct contact, we can do miracles, and we shouldn't underestimate it. Maybe in the last couple decades, we've become a bit too fancy politicians. And especially parliamentarians, we are regularly elected directly from the people, and we should be there hearing their concerns, talking to them, and doing the hard work of democracy. That's what I meant. Talking to them and making arguments, trying to convince them what the right solutions are. And I think this contact is probably the best best direct effect that we can have. Of course, with working also hard on social media. But I think just focusing on social media maybe in the past years has led us that we let some opportunities slip by.
Thank you. Yeah, in the back.
Hello, thank you very much for your presentation. I would like to hear your evaluation of the latest elections here in Slovenia. What does it say about the state of societal affairs in Slovenia? How important are human rights for Slovenians, and what does it say also about the gender aspect of it all?
Recent elections in Slovenia showed that people were mobilized. 70% of people went to vote, which I think is the most positive outcome of this election. In the previous election, it was just slightly higher. Right after COVID, it was 71%. So that was the most positive outcome element of the election that I can say. I was very worried that people would be upset with the polarization and stay at home. But they came out to vote, and the results show that they're deeply polarized, because we have almost the same amount of votes on center-left, center-right, 3 votes different between these two camps, and then the party in the middle that has 5 votes, which is now the deciding factor, is a new party with very populist opinions, where even themselves, they don't want to place themselves on the spectrum. So I think that tells us that we have a lot of work to do, but the positive aspect is that we have people who are mobilized. So they want democracy, they want us to do the work, and we'll see what happens. If the government forms, the government that will form will have to try to answer their needs, but we will definitely, it looks like we'll be in the opposition, even though the government is not formed yet. We'll make sure to use all parliamentary tools that we have to also address the foreign interference that was exposed before the election, possible foreign interference, and any undemocratic measures that may be used during the mandate. So.
Yes? Please just wait for the mic, please.
Thank you so much again. I just have a question regarding the election, because, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, when they published the age category of voters, I mean, people, if I'm not mistaken, 18 to 25 and 25 to 40, they're mostly voted to center-right and right-wing governments, if I'm not, parties, if I'm not mistaken. And left and center-lefties was like, I think, last 2 categories, if I'm not mistaken, somehow. I just wanted to ask, like, how these, like, age, why, like, young people, like, have more tendency toward, like, center-right and right-wing parties, and older generation toward, like, left and center-left parties. Thank you.
The poll I saw, so like 18 to 26 or 25, that was the first youngest voters. The most was SDS, which I wouldn't consider center-right, but hardcore right, like Orban allies. They're open about that. And then we are the second, but that's because also we got the most votes generally. That's how the election was. And then I don't remember the others, but Social Democrats are very low. I think the left, actually the more hardcore left, is higher than Social Democrats. They're more at the end. Resnica, which is this populist party that I told you in between, they generally didn't get that big of a percentage in the election, but outside of their result, they actually had a very good result with young people. So they were not at the top in this category of how many, but they had overrepresentation of young people, so they voted for them mostly. So I would say that, and then Nova Slovenia, I think also center-right more is also high, right behind us. So yeah, I think we were less successful in targeting young people who went to vote for our policies. And I think one big reason for that is that our politics are more long-term. And it's not a good excuse. I know we have to explain it to people, especially in Slovenia in the current situation. Our policies are geared towards having a sustainable healthcare system for the long term, having a sustainable pension system also for the long term. And these are systems that young people will benefit from earliest in 30 years. And I understand that currently they're like, you know, I don't care about this. However, even in 20 years, it will be too late. But it is, we had a main policy was housing, also in the previous mandate, which was the main one. We were addressing the most dire needs of young people as we assessed also in that time. But it obviously was not mobilizing enough. So we will learn from the results and try to do even better. But this question about sustainable social systems, to me, is an enigma. I don't know how we will explain it, because in the short-term thinking, it is impossible almost to explain the benefit with short-term thinking, and at the same time with a more and more individualized society that we have, where it's harder to say, you know, it's important that your grandma gets long-term care, otherwise your parents will have to pay for it. But if you're more and more individualized, maybe not thinking in that community context, I can understand that's harder. So any input that you all have on how to better communicate that would be valuable.
Thank you. Maybe we have time for one last question.
Regarding quotas, I would also like to point out that in Slovenia, you studied law, so I think you are familiar with it. Maybe you know the numbers of judges in Slovenian courts.
Mm-hmm.
And because there is discussion in some parts of society for some time that maybe we need in Slovenian court system quotas already into the other direction for male, for judges. Because it's like mostly, I know the number on family court is around 90%, 80 to 90% are female judges, and also on some many others. So what do you think about this? Also, how can we steer through these difficulties?
Are you in favor of that?
I'm in favor of the best shall judge.
So you're not in favor to have quotas in the
I mean,
judicial system in this circumstance?
For family, I think for family court, we should somehow have a balance, like everywhere else.
Exactly. And so this is actually a very useful example where you can think of how you feel and then apply it to all other sectors. But in this discussion about courts, I would urge you to also check the numbers at the highest court, which is the court that decides on all the appeals, also the family court appeals, and you will find that it is majority male. So still we see that women have predominantly been at the bottom of the court system. And then I also encourage you to check the salaries, and then you will understand also this maybe a bit more, sadly, because we tend to have over feminization in parts of sectors that are not well paid. And actually in Slovenia, judges were so underpaid to the point that the this is constitutional court, so outside of the court hierarchy that checks constitutionality, said that it is endangering the independence of the branch of government because they are so underpaid. So this is interesting in this context that you mentioned. But yes, as I said, I think everywhere with the best systems we will have it, they will be representative. And a similar example of that, I think, is also, we were talking with Anna, in the education system. I think we will better address the needs of all of our kids if the people who will be teaching them will be representative of them, so they can have role models.
Thank you. And of course, dear Lucia Tacer Perlin, thank you. It was really an honor to get to listen to your perspectives today. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.